Hey everybody, Steve Hupp here, Practice Director for Field Service at Thunder, with another SFS tip video where I take a question from either the Field Service partner community or the customer community and attempt to go in and build out a solution or a foundation of a solution in the hopes that it'll help the original poster as well as help anybody else who might be dealing with similar issues or having similar questions. Now today, I'm not really going to do a specific question from the community. I'm actually going to talk about a question that's come up a lot in the communities over the years, and that's around territory assignment, like automatic territory assignment for service appointments and work orders. And for those of you who aren't familiar, really the only way to automatically assign a service appointment or a service territory to an appointment using out-of-the-box functionality is polygons, right? Like unless you want the user to to insert the work order, the service territory in the work order, and then have that carry over automatically to the service appointment. If you want to, automatically kind of decide what the territory is going to be and assign that, polygons is the way to go. And it's good functionality. It basically allows you to go in and kind of draw a geographic region right within the dispatch console map. You associate that geographic region to a territory, and then based off of a service appointment being created with a lat long within that polygon, then it automatically assigns the territory. Works well in a lot of cases. In my experience, I have found it to be a little bit rigid though. Especially if you have like a territory hierarchy, you can kind of only choose whether you're going to do the highest or the lowest level. And then even if you're going to use, the polygon utility, which is, a snippet of code that you can actually call the same polygon automation that is used out of the box, you only get one territory back, right? So you can't get an array of territories and then use some additional logic to determine, like, let's say 2 territories overlapping, which territory you're going to choose. So over the years, right, the response has been, well, if using polygons isn't going to work, then you really have to go the route of custom logic, right? And actually build out, yes, no qualifiers, query for data, and then determine the territory that you're going to assign. And over the years, I've seen a lot of customers get really, really, complicated or complex in terms of their automation to determine the territories. And so I started thinking about, what about the in-between use case? What if you still want to use geography, but you don't want to go, completely custom. You just want to simply say, hey, assign the closest territory, based off proximity, right? And the use case that came to mind to me was like contractor territories or even any type of overlapping territories where you still want proximity to play a key part in what you're trying to accomplish, which is assign the territory, but you want to you want to also be able to do the closest, based off of just that simple proximity, and maybe nothing else, right? Maybe that's your sole identifier in terms of assigning the territory. And so one thing that I went in and built, and I thought was only possible really through code, but found it recently by working with some folks internally, is actually using the distance calculation in Flow to be able to determine by proximity which territory I wanted to assign. So that's what I'm going to kind of walk through here today in terms of what I decided to build, and I will show that as well as kind of the end result that I got to. So I will let my screen come up. So this is the flow that I built. There's some other things going on here, so I won't go through this, kind of verbatim in terms of, what the flow is doing, because I had some other things that I was doing in terms of testing. But in essence, what I'm doing here is I wanted to, again, build a flow that would allow me to use proximity to automatically identify the closest territory based off of the lat long on a work order, and then determine a territory based off of that without using something like polygons. So the first thing that I kind of did, and this is an important thing that I think is good to point out, is when you create a work order, right, or service appointment for that matter, the geolocation service is an async call, right? It's an async process that takes the address and then we'll do the geocoding. So the first thing that I found out was you can't really have this flow kick off just based off work order creation. You have to do it off of an update, and you have to do it off of, like, the lat long, for instance, being changed or being updated in order to effectively kick off this flow. And so you'll see here, I've got, when a record is created or updated, and then I had to do a formula, as my entry criteria to make sure that, just in case the work order was created with a lat long, even though, again, that doesn't happen as part of creation because it's a separate call that has to initiate. I did put this in here and basically said, hey, if the work order is created and the lat long is not null, I want the flow to fire. If the lat long is changed, I want it to fire. And then I also, indicated if the territory changes, and the prior value wasn't null, so again, that was part of something else I was testing in this process. But the biggest piece to take away here is the fact that I had to do it off an update and I had to do it off the lat long actually changing or updating in order to effectively kick off my flow and have this work. So as soon as my flow kicks off, the first thing I do, and again, this is a part of some other testing I was doing, but I validated if the lat long had changed. And the use case that I had was like, maybe you wanted to update the territory after the fact, and I didn't want the flow to kick off again if the territory got updated and the lat long effectively didn't change. So that's why I'm actually checking to see if the lat long changed. And then what I do is I come down and I get the service territories, right? So I get all the service territories and I start looping through them. And then I have my formula here. And again, I thought this was something, I knew that the distance calculation was available in code, right, in Apex. I didn't realize that it was just an available formula, and that's probably a miss on my part. But I went in and started playing with that. And the one thing that I found that I think is important here is, if you look at the documentation, the distance formula states that you can like do distance between two fields. It actually looked like you could do distance between like address field 1 and address field 2. And I tried to do that and I couldn't get it to work, right? So I actually had to go down a level, which again is these distance and geolocation formulas are kind of intertwined. And I had to go down a level to basically get the actual geolocation, like the lat long values from the service territory and then from my work order. So again, basically all this is doing is it's calculating the distance between the service territory in the loop and the work order, you know, based off of the lat longs. So what I do is, as I'm looping through, the first thing I do is I set a value. I have a default value of 0, right? And so basically the first territory that comes in is assumed to be the closest. I say, is the value, you know, is the value 0? If it is, I know it's the first one coming in. I assign the values, right? The distance value and the territory that is quote unquote the closest. And then I just keep looping through. And then each time a new territory comes in, I'm actually comparing to see, is it actually closer? You know, is that value less than the other value, than the original value? And if so, I'm overriding those and updating the distance and then updating the territory accordingly until I get through all of the territories. And then I come down here and I actually update the work order. And then I also go and update the service appointment. And I'll kind of explain why I have to do that here in a second. So that's kind of it, right? I mean, I've got my distance calculation. I'm looping through the territories based off, you know, lat long on the work order changing and finding the closest one. And so in terms of seeing how this works in action here, I'm just going to close this work order. I'm going to make sure to leave the service territory blank. And in this case, I'm just going to leave this address as 50 Fremont, right, in San Francisco. And so once I save this work order, my flow is going to kick off, right? It's going to automatically identify the territory. Now, keep in mind, you know, sometimes if you were to do something like this, this value may not be populated right away because again, it's an async call to do the lat long, right? So when that work order initially gets created, it's not automatically going to be filled in, but the flow is going to kick off and it's going to fill it in very quickly after. So what you'll see here is that the San Francisco Training Center was actually the closest territory by proximity that was found. And it assigned that territory. And then again, with my flow, I actually had to go and assign it to the service appointment as well. Now, the reason why I did this is, for those of you who aren't familiar, when you do like the auto create service appointment on the work type, for example, you know, there are values like the service territory and the address that will automatically go from the work order to the service appointment, but that only happens upon creation. So since I'm doing this post-creation, right, as an update, I have to then go and update the value on the service appointment to make sure that it is matching the work order service territory as well as the address, right? Because again, those values aren't carried down if they're not there at creation, right? In this case, the address was, but the service territory wasn't, right? So I had to go and set that. So again, then another piece of my flow that I did is I actually had it, and this was something I didn't really identify in the flow itself, but I had it to where if I update the lat long, right, if the lat long changes, right, I want the flow to kick off again and assign the next closest territory. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm just going to actually I'm going to update this address. And I'm just going to put Downers Grove, Illinois. Make sure to put a zip code in here though, because you do need a zip code in order to effectively geocode. So once I have to update the address to Downers Grove, Illinois, right, what's going to happen is this is actually going to get updated, right? So see, like automatically, right, my flow kicked off, went through the same thing again, found the closest territory, and that turned out to be this virtual trainers, right, territory, because that happens to be in 114 West Illinois. So again, you know, what I consider to be the biggest use case is overlapping territories, right? Where you have territories in very close proximity to each other. They might service the same groups of customers, but again, if one comes in that's closer to, you know, or the other, then I still want to be able to say, well, it's closer to that one, so I'm just going to assign it to that one, right? Instead of having to worry about trying to finagle my polygons and having some customers missed in that sense, or, you know, if they're contractor territories, having them not really feeling like, I mean, they're servicing the same, you know, service areas, so why not be able to treat them in kind of like a fair fashion and, you know, go by the closest one instead of, you know, trying to define their specific geographic regions with no overlap whatsoever. So the last thing that I incorporated into my flow was the ability to change the territory after the fact. And again, that was part of kind of my formula of my entry criteria is, let's say, for instance, that I don't want to change the address, but I just want to update the territory, right? And what I found when I was testing this out is I originally had my flow kind of kicking off every time, which wasn't really ideal because, you know, if I want to manually change the territory, I want to be able to do that. And I want to make sure that that doesn't automatically kind of reset. And that's actually one of the challenges of polygons as well, is that automation to assign the territory kind of kicks off every time the record is updated. And so you could be trying to update that service territory value and actually have that completely overridden by that automation that's running with polygons. And so, you know, this will be really, really simple and not really mind-blowing, I don't think. But if I wanted to manually update this territory after the fact, I have the ability to do that. And again, my flow doesn't kick off, right? It doesn't do that because the lat long itself has not changed. I simply was updating the service territory. And again, if I update the address back to, you know, let's say 50 Fremont, right, which was the original address, so 50 Fremont in San Francisco, right? What should happen here is it should automatically go back to the training center, the San Francisco Training Center, because that is the closest territory. And then again, I have my automation coming all the way through and making sure that this is updated as well. So that's it. You know, that's what I did. So again, you know, nothing crazy here, just a different way that you could look at, you know, using declarative automation to assign a territory by proximity, you know, kind of avoiding some of the pitfalls that polygons might put in front of you or some of the limitations it might put in front of you, but still being able to use proximity in a way to assign your territories as you're creating, you know, work orders or service requirements. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, if there's anything that myself or Thunder can do for your field service implementation, please feel free to reach out and let me know. Thanks so much.